After 10 years of being mated, I discovered my aloof alpha mate had been keeping a sunshine-like Omega lover. That Omega could bring warmth and light to everyone she meets. My alpha mate, Dominic, who had spent his childhood in the doldrums, was easily attracted by that kind of pure warmth. That very night, I presented him with a mate bond severance agreement. Dominic sneered coldly as he tore up the agreement, throwing a psychiatric evaluation at me instead. Sign this. Admit you have delusional disorder, and I'll send you to the best mental hospital to live out your days. I know all about your dirty little tricks. I won't give you any chance to hurt her. So all these years, every little thing I'd done to protect him? To him, it was just despicable scheming. I refused to sign. Dominic had me bound and tortured with silver powder, watching coldly as I convulsed in agony. He even had our 2 5-year-old pups hung from the bow of massive ships about to collide. Either sign, or watch them get crushed to pulp. Your call. I dropped to my knees on the deck, banging my head against the wood like a madwoman, begging him to let me sign. But it was too late. I watched helplessly as my pups' small bodies got torn apart by metal shrapnel. When I opened my eyes again, I was back on the day I discovered he was keeping that girl. I decided never to love him again. But after I left him, Dominic suddenly went mad searching for me everywhere. In my previous life, I died without ever truly meeting Aria. So after being reborn, the first thing I did was to find her, after instructing my assistant to take my 2 pups abroad. She was right there at the end of the alley, staying among a group of fluffy, displaced dogs. The afternoon sunlight spilled over her like molten gold, outlining a warm halo around her. All the dogs were attracted by her tenderness, gathering around her. I watched with some envy. I loved these little dogs and animals too. But perhaps because of my no-nonsense and stern nature, rarely smiling and always maintaining a cold demeanor, the dogs were always wary of me, just like now. I stood at a distance, watching in silence. Some dogs noticed me and suddenly lifted their heads. I instinctively froze, wanting to step back, but it was already too late. A black dog that had been lying obediently at Aria's feet shot up like black lightning, suddenly aggressive. I stumbled backward in fright, but Aria opened her arms and pulled me tightly into her slender embrace. Rip, the sharp sound of fabric tearing, accompanied by a suppressed cry of pain. I opened my eyes in shock to see Aria's brow furrowed in pain, and crimson blood had soaked through her sleeve. I'm so sorry. Are you okay? Did that scare you? Don't blame them, please. They're usually really friendly, but now they might be nervous because there's a stranger here. She still apologized to me for those dogs. My heart swelled with bittersweet emotion. It was clearly my fault, however, she was the one who got hurt. I wanted to help treat her wound, but she seemed embarrassed. Oh, you really don't need to do that. Yes, I do. At my repeated insistence, she pointed to the small apartment building nearby. My home is upstairs. I have a first aid kit. I followed her into her apartment. I took in the cream-colored carpet, soft sofas, thriving green plants on the windowsill, and the air filled with a faint scent of moonflower incense. But what struck me most were the photos everywhere, on walls, shelves, even the refrigerator door of them were about her and Dominic. In every photo, Dominic wore genuine smiles I'd never seen before. He would look at her tenderly, playfully pinch her cheek, and hold her tightly in his arms. I held a cotton swab soaked with healing herbs, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip it. I'm really sorry to trouble you with this. Aria tilted her head slightly, smiling at me completely free of shadows. Sunlight streamed through the window onto her face, pure and beautiful. Looking at her radiant expression, I smiled bitterly at myself. As his Luna for 10 years, I never had a single photo with Dominic. Even in our mating ceremony, it was still not allowed for me to take a photo with him. I used to think he was just naturally cold or really didn't like taking pictures. But now I realized, the real thing he didn't like was to take pictures with me. Aria's wounds weren't very serious. The little dog didn't have much strength, but because she was an Omega, her wounds couldn't heal automatically and kept bleeding. I was about to wrap her arm with bandages when the door was violently pushed open. A tall, imposing figure stormed in, carrying the harsh winter air with him. It was Dominic's. He shoved me aside like I was filthy garbage, with no mercy at all. I was caught off guard as his alpha aura pressed down on me with crushing force. My wolf whimpered and trembled under his dominance, my legs giving out as I collapsed to the ground in a pathetic heap. So embarrassing as I was, however, Dominic didn't even glance at me. His eyes, which always held frost when looking at me, were now filled with undisguised heartache and anxiety for that Omega. Arya, what happened? How did you get hurt? Are you in pain? Is it serious? A blush rose on Arya's cheeks, and she looked somewhat uncomfortable. Dominic, don't be like this, there's someone else here. Only then did Dominic spare me a dismissive glance without any warmth. She is just an insignificant person, and we don't need to pay any attention to her. When he turned back to Arya, his tone instantly became indulgent, even carrying playful teasing. Or is my darling getting jealous? Afraid I'm worried about someone else? Don't worry, I've only ever had eyes for you. Arya shyly buried her face in his chest. No one cared about my existence at all. I struggled to my feet, quietly left with my head down. The door closed behind me, cutting off all the tender words inside. My heart felt dead as ash. Having been married for 10 years, Dominic had always been impatient with me. I had fought rogue wolves to help him protect pack resources, got severely injured, and was near death. After being unconscious for 3 days, the first words I heard from Dominic when I woke up were accusations, that I wasted his time, that I delayed his work. No matter what I did, it was always wrong in his eyes. When I fell ill, he said I was deliberately playing pitiful to get his attention. When I got hurt, he said I was wasting time and delaying work. Even when I nearly died giving birth to our children, he said I brought it on myself. However, Arya had only been scratched with a small cut. He was heartbroken. I should have understood that no matter how many times we started over, Dominic's tenderness and love were only for Arya, and I would always be the extra, eyesore, scheming destroyer in his eyes. Walking home in a daze, my phone suddenly vibrated in my bag. Luna, everything went well. Your pups have arrived safely. The Alpha will never find them. Please rest assured. Those few short lines made me feel relieved. Living again, I had to at least keep my pups safe. Not long after I returned home, Dominic kicked the door open. Without giving me any chance to react, he slapped me hard across the face. Elena. He gritted his teeth. I warned you to behave like a Luna and not to bother Arya. How dare you get into her house? What else do you want to do? To her. I covered my face and slowly raised my head, without saying a word. He must have carefully tended to Arya before coming to settle accounts with me. Seeing me remain silent, the disgust in Dominic's eyes grew stronger. He pulled out a document and threw it in my face. Sign it. The papers fluttered down in front of me. It was familiar, the psychiatric evaluation. The same as in my previous life. I looked down at that paper and suddenly burst into laughter. Dominic frowned tightly, seeming to find my reaction even more unreasonable. Finished laughing, I stopped and didn't cry or beg like I had in my previous life. Instead, I wrote my name, Elena, without hesitation. I handed the signed document back to him. He snatched it away with satisfaction and looked down at me with condescension. Since you were obedient this time, I'll spare 2 days each month to visit you and our children here. I kept my head down, my long hair hiding the mockery at the corner of my mouth. He still hadn't noticed that this mansion was empty. Our children weren't here at all. But he didn't care at all and hurriedly left. What occupied his mind was probably only the small wound on Arya's arm that had long been treated well. Hearing his footsteps fade away, I dialed a number. It rang only once before being answered. My eyes immediately reddened. Father, I know I was wrong. I regret becoming the Luna of Bloodclaw Pack. Please take me home. After arranging with my family to return home in 5 days, I finally collapsed in exhaustion. My wolf had recognized Dominic as my fated mate from the moment we met. When I fell for him, Father had warned me that Dominic wasn't suitable for me. If I insisted on mating him, I would be the only one who got hurt in the end. I didn't believe it then. I naively thought love could conquer everything. And I believed that as long as I loved Dominic, everything could be overcome. But after 10 years, My passion for love had long been worn away by his coldness. I looked down at my broken body and smiled bitterly. I was exhausted. While packing my things, something suddenly flashed through my mind. In my previous life, there had been rogue wolves hiding around Arya's residents who killed dogs for their sick pleasure. It seemed to be a threat to Arya, making Dominic furious, and he thoroughly investigated that entire area. Since I will leave, I might as well warn her. Consider repaying the kindness she showed me earlier when she protected me and got hurt. I wrapped my coat, covering the swelling on my face, and walked out. As soon as I reached the same path, I saw Arya looking around anxiously. I hesitated for a moment, then approached her. Arya, what are you looking for? Arya looked surprised to see me. Then her expression deepened with worry. Oh, it's you. I'm looking for Steven, a new little dog who has recently arrived here. Several dogs have gone missing these past few days, including a lot who I knew. The food I leave out for them often goes untouched. I'm worried. I suspect there might be someone specifically targeting or harming the dogs. My heart sank slightly. Don't panic. I'll help you look for them. Arya was stunned. Then her face broke into a grateful smile. Really? That's wonderful. Thank you. Drawing on my vague memories from my previous life, I deliberately led Arya toward the abandoned valley at the western edge of the territory. I think my wolf hears something over there. Arya immediately tensed up, holding her breath to listen carefully. Just as we rounded a pile of broken concrete pipes, a piercing dog's cry reached our ears. We both froze, following the sound. We saw a filthy and stinking rogue wolf, wearing work clothes, crouched beside a torn burlap sack, gripping a gleaming silver knife in his hand. Something was struggling violently inside the sack, and dark red blood had already soaked through the rough fabric, dripping onto the earth. At his feet lay several motionless dog bodies, their forms twisted, clearly having suffered tremendous torture. Arya's voice trembled uncontrollably. Stop. You bastard. The man was startled at being discovered. Then his face twisted with extreme anger and viciousness. He suddenly stood up, brandishing the blood-stained silver blade, and charged straight toward us. Meddling bitches. You're asking for death. The silver blade was about to pierce Arya's chest. In that instant, I saw flashes of my last life. My 2 children are lying in pools of blood, their small bodies cold and stiff. No. I couldn't let her get hurt. I used every ounce of strength left in my weakened body, throwing myself sideways and crashing hard into Arya, sending her stumbling backward into a pile of weeds. The ice-cold silver metal instantly pierced through my abdomen. Warm blood gushed out, quickly staining my light-colored coat crimson. The silver hurt my wolf immediately. I couldn't even shift. The rogue wolf, seeing he'd missed his target, flew into an even greater rage. He grabbed my hair and slammed my head viciously against the exposed concrete pillar beside us. Bang! My vision went black and blurred. I could only watch helplessly as the man cursed and pulled out his blade, turning once again toward Arya, who was pale with terror. Get away. Don't touch her. At the critical moment, a thunderous roar exploded. Dominic suddenly appeared, kicking the man 3 meters away with just one strike. He rushed over and pulled Arya tightly into his arms, his voice filled with unprecedented tension and fear. Arya, are you all right? Are you hurt? Don't be afraid, I'm here. Arya was still in shock, tears finally beginning to flow as she clutched his clothes desperately, pointing in my direction. Dominic. She protected me and lost so much blood. Save her, please. The subdued rogue wolf, desperate to escape punishment, endured his pain and immediately shouted his lies. It was that woman in the light coat, who ordered me to do this. She said she hated these dogs, hated this lady with them. She told me to kill all these pups to frighten this lady. I was just taking money to do that. She's been working with rogues to betray you and your pack. His words were full of holes, utterly ridiculous. But Dominic believed him, because he knew that a lot of dogs and small animals would bristle and hiss when they saw me. And he didn't believe I liked dogs. His eyes filled with extreme disgust. You really never change. Beyond redemption. He looked toward the rogue wolf. I'll give you a chance to redeem yourself. As long as she screams for 3 days and nights straight without dying, I'll let you leave and give you enough money to disappear forever." The man's eyes immediately lit up. "Thank you, Alpha. Thank you, Alpha. I'll make sure it's done." I couldn't believe it. "You can't do this to me, I'm your mate." But Dominic paid no attention to me, holding the terrified Arya as he turned and left. The next 3 days became a nightmare beyond anything I could have imagined in my 2 lifetimes combined. Fire torture, silver poisoning, savage bites from the rogue wolf, hunger, cold time lost all meaning. There was only endless pain and darkness. On the evening of the 3rd day, the rough seemed to become boring. Or perhaps he was afraid I might die before the 3 days were up, and he wouldn't get his payment, so he finally stopped reluctantly. "3 days are up, bitch. You're tough as nails. Haha, your alpha mate is generous. I'm free. Next time you have work like this, remember to call me." The world finally fell silent. I lay in the dim little room, staring vacantly at the sunlight streaming in. Was I going to die? That was okay, I thought. Elena. In my daze, I seemed to hear a voice choking with tears. "Where are you? Please answer me." The voice grew closer. It was Arya. When she saw me in the corner, bloody mangled, she suddenly covered her mouth and let out a broken, deeply suppressed whimper. She almost crawled to my side, her trembling hands suspended in midair, as if she didn't know where to touch me, afraid of adding to my pain. I'm sorry. I overheard him talking with his beta assistant. That's when I realized what a bastard he really is. I must have been crazy to fall in love with such a madman who doesn't value life at all. She wiped away her tears forcefully. "I'm taking you away. I'm getting you out of this hell right now. I'm taking you to the healers." She tried to lift me but found I was frighteningly light and fragile. She didn't know how to help me. "Don't sleep. Elena, please don't fall asleep." Her voice shook terribly. "I know you're his mate now, and I know you have children. I'm sorry, Elena. I know you must hate me, but think about your babies. They can't lose their mother." Hearing those words, my unfocused pupils moved slightly. My pups. They were already safe. That is enough. I used my last bit of strength to shake my head at her, ever so slowly. I looked past her toward the window outside, and smiled with relief. Let it all end this way. Dominic returned to the apartment he shared with Arya, his heart still racing from the rescue operation. The familiar hallway felt different somehow, as if something fundamental had shifted in the air itself. As he pushed open the door, the place was terrifyingly silent. "Arya," he called out, his voice echoing strangely in the empty space. Usually, she would greet him with that bright smile that made everything in his world feel right. But today there was nothing. No one answered. A nameless unease instantly gripped him, starting as a cold knot in his stomach, and spreading through his entire body. His wolf was restless, pacing anxiously within him, sensing something was wrong. He strode quickly into the living room, his heavy footsteps the only sound breaking the oppressive silence. His gaze immediately swept across the familiar space. The cream-colored sofa where they cuddled during movie nights, the small kitchen where Arya made him coffee every morning, the walls covered with their happy photographs. But something was starkly out of place on the coffee table. It was an ordinary white envelope, pressed under a deep red booklet. The sight of it made his blood run cold. He knew that shade of red. He knew what that booklet was before he even touched it. His hands trembled as he rushed forward and grabbed the booklet. It was our mating certificate. The official document that bound me and him together, bearing the official pact seal and our signatures from 10 years ago. The sight of it hit him like a physical blow. How did Arya get this? Why was it here? Beneath the certificate were several carefully cut photographs. In the photos, 2 adorable pups were giggling at the camera, their chubby cheeks flushed with happiness. Their eyes were like black grapes, bright and innocent, their small features faintly echoing his own. The strong jawline, the shape of their noses, even the way one of them tilted his head. His sons. The children he'd barely acknowledged, barely thought about except as burdens that tied him to me. She knew. The realization hit him like lightning. Arya knew everything. She knew he was mated, knew he had 2 children, knew about all his deception and lies. She knew that for the past year, while he'd been telling her he was free to love her, he'd been living a complete fabrication. Overwhelming fury instantly destroyed his rationality, nearly consuming him. But it wasn't regret for his own deception. Rather, he felt this was all my revenge. I must have told her. I must have shown up here, planted these photos, destroyed his happiness out of pure spite. Dominic's face turned ashen, veins bulging at his temples as dark thoughts raced through his mind. How dare I do this? How dare I destroy what he had with Arya? This was exactly the kind of manipulative, vindictive behavior he'd expected from me. His hands shook as he yanked out his phone. He found the number he'd almost never actively dialed and pressed it viciously. My number. Ring, 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 busy signal. No answer. The electronic tone felt like mockery. I was probably screening his calls, probably sitting somewhere laughing at the chaos she'd created. He hung up and called again. Still busy. His grip on the phone tightened until his knuckles turned white. Rage burned through his entire body like wildfire. He called his beta instead. The moment the call connected, he erupted in fury. Where is Elena? Tell her to get here immediately. Right now. His voice was so loud it seemed to shake the apartment walls. The beta on the other end was clearly terrified by his unprecedented rage. Hey Alpha, wasn't Luna left at that abandoned valley in the Western Territory? You said to let her learn a lesson. The words hit him like ice water. Only then did Dominic remember. In his blind rage that day, he had directly abandoned me there. Left me with that rogue wolf as punishment. The memory came flooding back. Arya's terror, the blood on my clothes, his absolute certainty that I was behind everything. Later, when Arya woke up, she had tearfully explained what really happened. She explained that I had been stabbed trying to save her, that I wasn't the mastermind at all, that I had thrown myself in front of the blade meant for her, had taken a silver knife to the stomach to protect her. When he heard this explanation, something had briefly stirred in his heart, a flicker of something that might have been guilt or regret. But then he thought, even if it was a misunderstanding, letting a scheming she-wolf like me suffer a bit wasn't a big deal. I had been a thorn in his side for years. A few days of discomfort would teach me to stay in my place. That rogue wolf wouldn't dare actually kill Eluna anyone. He could always send me to the healers later for treatment. It wasn't like he'd sentenced me to death. But now his beta was saying I was still there. It had been a full 5 days since that incident. Why hadn't I returned yet? Why hadn't I come crawling back, broken and apologetic as usual? Dominic cursed under his breath, his face turning pale as the implications hit him. An unprecedented panic coiled around his heart like a venomous snake, squeezing tighter with each passing second. His wolf was howling now, a sound of pure distress that echoed through his entire being. He didn't even have time to hang up. His phone crashed to the floor with a bang as he dropped it. He rushed out of the apartment like a madman, his heart hammering against his ribs. Jumping into his car, he floored the accelerator, racing toward the Western Territory. The engine roared as he pushed the vehicle far beyond safe speeds, weaving through traffic like a man possessed. Throughout the drive, his heart pounded as if it might explode. Someone as tenacious as me couldn't really be in trouble, right? After so many close calls. Before, I had always stubbornly survived. When rogue wolves attacked the pack borders, I'd fought them off despite being outnumbered. When poison was discovered in the pack's water supply, I'd been the first to drink from an unknown source to test its safety. This time it was just one violent rogue wolf. How could I not handle it? Besides, that wolf only wanted money, wouldn't dare kill anyone. I must still be there waiting for him to come. Probably weak and grateful, ready to forgive him and return to our old dynamic. He thought about what he would say to me. This time he was genuinely afraid, he admitted to himself. The fear was foreign and unwelcome, but undeniable. If I really didn't want to go to the mental facility, he was willing to send me abroad instead, flying to see me every 6 months. Not more often. More would give me other ideas about reconciliation or hope. Oh right, he'd have to divorce me first. He had already deceived Arya once. Deceiving her again would hurt her. Maybe if he was legally free, she could forgive him for the children, for the hidden marriage. Screech. The harsh sound of brakes filled the air as Dominic practically tumbled out of the car, rushing toward the ruins with desperate energy. However, there was no expected sound of a woman's voice, no sign of that twisted rogue wolf. Only dead silence. Before him lay blackened, dried bloodstains. The bloodstains were scattered but covered a shockingly large area, painting a gruesome picture of violence and suffering. The pattern showed how much the person had endured, how they had been dragged across the concrete, how they had fought and failed and bled. The air was thick with a nauseating stench of blood and decay. But I was not there. Dominic's body swayed violently, his vision going black, his mind blank, barely able to stand. His wolf was completely silent now, as if it had retreated to some unreachable place within him. Where was I? Where was the person he had personally abandoned here? Search. He spun around, roaring in near breakdown at his subordinates who had followed him. Find her. Dig up every inch if you have to find her. His subordinates fell silent with fear at his wild appearance, immediately scattering to search frantically through every pile of rubble, every shadowed corner. Time crawled by, each second like a dull blade scraping against Dominic's nerves. The sun was setting, casting long shadows that seemed to mock his desperation. Finally, his assistant approached tremblingly, holding his phone, stammering nervously. Alpha, we just discovered that yesterday afternoon Miss Arya drove here. The security cameras caught her vehicle entering the area. Afterward, there seemed to be another person in her car, heading toward the outskirts. After that, we can't trace anything more. Miss Arya and Luna, they both seemed to have disappeared. It wasn't until 7 days later that Dominic finally found Arya, in front of a newly dug grave. He saw Arya. She knelt on the damp earth, unmindful of the dirt staining her clothes. She wore solemn black clothes that seemed to swallow her small frame. Her figure so frail it seemed a gust of wind could blow her away. Her usually vibrant golden hair hung limp and lifeless around her shoulders. In her arms was a white jade urn. Her eyes were red and swollen from days of crying as she prepared to place the urn into the prepared grave. Her hands trembled violently, as if she couldn't bear to let go of what she held. Dominic's approach was unsteady, his usual confident stride reduced to stumbling steps. His voice came out as barely more than a whisper, hoarse from days of shouting orders and making demands. Arya, what is that? But even as he asked, his gaze was fixed deadly on that white jade container, and somewhere deep in his chest he already knew. His wolf had gone completely silent, as if it had retreated so far within him that it might never return. Hearing his voice, Arya slowly raised her head. Her beautiful face was gaunt, hollowed out by grief and guilt. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her usually perfect complexion was blotchy and pale. Seeing it was him, her red eyes, originally filled with sorrow, instantly blazed with undisguised disgust and hatred. The transformation was so complete, so violent, that Dominic actually stepped backward. Get lost. Her voice was raw, broken from crying, but the venom in it was unmistakable. A cold, hypocritical man like. You would only pollute her sight even if you died in front of her. Get out. The words made his blood run cold. This was Arya, the woman who had once looked at him with such love, such adoration. The woman who had smiled at his terrible jokes and forgiven his worst moods. Dominic trembled all over, pierced by the naked hatred in her eyes. Never had anyone looked at him with such complete revulsion. The terrible suspicion in his heart became clearer and clearer, almost driving him insane. No, impossible. He shook his head violently, his dark hair falling across his face. It can't be her. It can't be Elena. She's too stubborn to die. Too stubborn to leave me. But even as he spoke, his voice cracked with growing hysteria. Suddenly stepping forward, he roughly snatched the urn from Arya's arms. Don't touch her. Arya screamed, lunging forward, but Dominic was faster, stronger. The urn felt ice cold against his palms. Though light, it made his hands shake uncontrollably. How could she be dead? How could she possibly be dead? His eyes were bloodshot, his tone obsessive and crazed. The composed alpha facade was completely gone, replaced by something wild and desperate. She clearly said she was an angel sent to love me. She said she would never leave me in this lifetime. She promised to make me fall in love with her. Her words haven't come true yet. How could she just die? It's fake, this must be fake. He turned the urn over in his hands, as if searching for proof that it was empty, that this was all an elaborate trick. I was always so clever, always scheming. This had to be another one of my plans. He refused to believe I could die there because of one simple rogue wolf. Suddenly, memories flashed through Dominic's mind like lightning strikes. The mountain incident from 3 years ago. Because of enemy pursuit, he and I had been trapped on a mountain for 7 days with limited supplies and no way to call for help. When he was unconscious with high fever from his injuries, delirious and dying, he vaguely remembered feeling warm liquid with a metallic taste flowing into his mouth. It had kept him alive, kept him strong enough to survive until rescue came. He hadn't paid attention then, his fever-addled mind even thinking I had gone mad, giving him dirty water to drink from some contaminated source. So when they were finally rescued, seeing me pale and swaying, barely able to stand, he had frowned and scolded me. "We've been rescued and you're still putting on an act." He had been so angry that I was still trying to gain his sympathy even after their ordeal was over. But much later, weeks afterward, he had discovered that what he had drunk wasn't dirty water at all, but my blood from when I had cut my wrists. I had fed him my own life force to keep him alive, growing weaker and weaker as I sustained him. The revelation had disturbed him at the time, but he had pushed it aside. Just another example of my dramatic, manipulative nature. Holding what might be my ashes, that memory cut through him like a blade. How could a woman who loved him enough to die for him bear to cruelly abandon him in death? "She loved me," he whispered, his voice breaking. "She loved me more than anything. She wouldn't leave me. She promised she wouldn't leave me." Arya was completely enraged by his crazed ramblings. "Dominic, you're fucking insane. A complete psychopath." She scrambled to her feet, her black dress torn and dirty from kneeling on the ground. "When she was alive, you treated her like garbage. You trampled on her, tortured her, wished she would die immediately. Now that you've driven her to death, you're here playing the devoted lover? Disgusting." Her voice rose to a shriek, years of suppressed knowledge pouring out. "I know everything. I know how you treated her. She told me, before she died. She told me about the silver poisoning, about the psychological abuse, about how you made her sign papers saying she was insane." She cried out, overwhelmed by enormous regret and self-blame. "I'm also a killer who caused her death. I should have discovered this long ago. I should have seen through your lies. If only I had gone to find her earlier, even just 1 hour earlier, she wouldn't have died covered in blood in my arms." Arya's words became more broken, more desperate. She was so cold when I found her, so still. And she looked at me with these eyes, these grateful eyes, like she was thankful that someone cared enough to find her. Do you know what her last words were? "Dominic couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. She said, 'Thank you for being kind to me.' Not to you, Dominic. To me, a stranger who showed her more kindness in one afternoon than you showed her in 10 years. Her words hammered into Dominic's heart like heavy blows, each one cracking something fundamental inside him. He didn't want to believe it. He couldn't believe it. But his people couldn't find me. After 7 days of searching every possible location, turning over every stone, following every lead, nothing. Even the civil records showed my registration had been cancelled. My identification had been officially terminated. According to every database, every system, I no longer existed. Only then did Dominic realize in bewilderment. I was really dead. He thought I would always be there, annoying him, yet he had grown accustomed to my presence. I would really never come back. This was something he had long anticipated. Something he had wished for countless times during their marriage. He should feel happy. He should feel relieved. He had hated me for so long, resented my constant presence, my demands for attention, my desperate attempts to make him love me. But why did hearing of my death hurt so much? Why did the thought of never seeing me again feel like his chest was being torn open? Dominic stared blankly at my black and white photo on the tombstone. It was a formal photo, probably from some pack function. I looked composed, dignified, every inch the proper Luna. But my eyes held that familiar sadness that he had seen so often and ignored so completely. So small, now permanently attached there. He could no longer hear Arya's angry curses, his mind filled entirely with images of my face. Me tugging at his clothes, acting cute and coquettish, trying to make him smile. My sultry eyes when moved by passion. Those rare moments when he had actually touched me with something approaching tenderness. Me cooking elaborate meals that he barely acknowledged. Me staying up all night when he was sick, bringing him medicine and cool cloths for his fever. But mostly, my eyes full of sadness and tears after he had blamed me for something, dismissed me, pushed me away yet again. And now, those eyes were forever frozen in that small photograph before him. They would never look at him so vividly again. Never light up when he entered a room. No matter how coldly he greeted me. Never fill with hope when he spoke my name. Never shed tears over his cruelty. The belated grief nearly suffocated him. A crushing weight on his chest that made breathing impossible. But the next second, all those emotions suddenly transformed into towering rage. Someone had to pay for this. Someone had to be held accountable for the loss of something he had never realized was precious. Find him. Find that bastard for me. His voice was deadly quiet, but it carried the promise of violence. Immediately. Right now. I want him begging for death but unable to die. Dominic's subordinates were extremely efficient. Within half a day, the man who had just been dreaming happily with his newfound wealth was dragged before Dominic. They found him in a seedy bar 3 towns over, drunk and boasting about his recent windfall. Seeing Dominic's face dark enough to drip water, the man's legs went weak and he fell directly to his knees. Sir, I got the money. Is there anything else you need? The fool actually thought this was about more work. Dominic said nothing, directly throwing a vicious punch that connected with the man's jaw with a sickening crack. The man immediately screamed, blood spraying from his mouth as teeth scattered across the floor. Sir, I was wrong. I shouldn't have taken your money. I'll return it right now. Please let me go. I'll never dare again. But Dominic didn't listen. Like a completely irrational beast, he threw punch after punch, madly beating the man on the ground. Each blow was fueled by grief, by rage, by the terrible realization of what he had lost. At first, the man desperately pleaded for mercy, curling into a ball and trying to protect his head. But soon he realized this was meant to beat him to death. When Dominic kicked him hard in the ribs again, the man spat out a mouthful of blood and actually laughed hoarsely while cursing. When that bitch was being tortured to death by me, crawling on the ground like a dog begging for mercy, where were you? His words were calculated to cause maximum pain. She screamed for 3 days and nights until her voice was gone. Blood everywhere and you didn't show up. She kept calling your name. Even when I was cutting her, burning her, she was crying for you to save her. Pathetic. Now that she's dead, you fucking remember to settle accounts with me? Playing the great romantic. Duh. You're the most disgusting and hypocritical one. I was just doing a job for money. You're the one who handed me the knife. You're the real killer. Dominic's eyes grew even redder at the description of my suffering. The image of me calling his name while being tortured nearly broke what was left of his sanity. He slowly straightened up, his movements precise and controlled despite the rage coursing through him. He adjusted his disheveled suit cuffs, his voice calm but even more chilling than his previous fury. Send him to the deepest part of the silver prison, to keep company with rogue wolves who've been starved for over 10 days. The silver prison was legendary among criminals, a place where the worst offenders were sent to face the pack's most vicious, barely controlled wolves. Tell them there, as long as he's breathing, they can care for him however they want. The man who had just been defiant immediately despaired, understanding exactly what fate awaited him. No. I was wrong. I was really wrong. Please. Please give me a quick death. Don't send me there. No. His screams echoed off the walls as Dominic's men dragged him away. But Dominic seemed not to hear, turning and walking away directly. Chapter 8. Actually, that day, I really was going to die. 3 days and nights of continuous torture had pushed my already fragile sanity to the brink of complete collapse. My body was broken, my spirit shattered, and the line between consciousness and delirium had blurred beyond recognition. In my delirium, haunted by pain and blood loss, I thought of my previous life. The memories came flooding back with crystal clarity. as if my dying brain was forcing me to relive every moment of agony. After Dominic had my children killed, he immediately turned to comfort his sunshine girl. I could still see him cradling Arya in his arms, whispering sweet reassurances while my world crumbled around me. Only I endured the enormous pain and despair, gathering my pups' remains piece by piece from the twisted metal wreckage. But it was so difficult. It was nighttime, and the pups were so small. The ship's collision had scattered debris across a wide area, and in the darkness, finding anything was nearly impossible. I cried as I searched for 3 days and nights, my hands bleeding from crawling over sharp metal, only finding partial remains. Tiny fingers, a piece of clothing, a small shoe. At that time, I wanted nothing more than to follow my children to death. The pain was unbearable, like someone had reached into my chest and torn out my heart while leaving me alive to feel every moment of the absence. But Dominic coldly mocked me. He said they were just 2 dolls. What was I putting on an act for? His voice had been so dismissive, so cruel, as if my grief was just another manipulation tactic. He didn't know that his enemies, to get revenge on him and on me, had long ago replaced the dolls with 2 real children. Our real children. Our babies. How he eventually found out, I had forgotten. The memory was too painful, buried too deep. I only remembered him kneeling before me much later, his face pale as death, begging for my forgiveness. But by then it was too late. The damage was done. That's when Father burst in during this lifetime. I lay in the emergency room, tears streaming down my face as I looked at Father through swollen, barely open eyes. Father, my voice was barely a whisper, my throat raw from screaming. Seeing me like this, broken, bloody, barely alive, Father almost dragged Dominic over and killed him on the spot. His face went through every stage of fury I'd ever seen, his hands actually reaching for Dominic's throat. I was the one who stopped him. I don't want him to die. Death would be the lightest punishment for him. I want him to live in pain for the rest of his life. The words came out with surprising strength, fueled by a determination I didn't know I still possessed. Did he still love me? I wasn't sure. Love and obsession were hard to tell apart sometimes, especially when it came to Dominic. But I could be certain he couldn't live without me. Over 10 years I had infiltrated every aspect of his life. I knew his habits, his weaknesses, his fears. I had made myself indispensable in ways he didn't even realize. I waited to see him kneel down and cry, begging me to return. Looking at Arya outside the hospital room, worried and concerned, pacing back and forth in the hallway, I turned away and decided to fake my death and leave. With Father's help and considerable resources, I was soon reunited with my 2 pups. The moment I saw them again, safe and healthy in Father's secure compound, something inside me finally began to heal. Meeting their bright, shining eyes, their faces lighting up when they saw me, my nose stung with emotion. "Mommy!" they cried, throwing themselves into my arms. As long as I had them, it was enough. After adjusting myself and recovering from my injuries, I began taking over Father's business empire. It was challenging work. Father had built a financial conglomerate that spanned multiple countries, with interests in everything from shipping to technology. It took 3 full years for the company shareholders to gradually accept me. They had been skeptical at first, wondering if the Alpha's former Luna could handle the ruthless world of international business. I proved them wrong, one deal at a time. Just when I thought life was about to settle into a peaceful new track, when I had finally found my rhythm in this new world, my quiet phone suddenly began flashing frantically. The screen lit up with alerts, messages, emergency notifications. Before I could check what was happening, the world suddenly spun around me. A tall figure blocked out the sunlight streaming through my office windows. That familiar, soul-deep cold scent hit me like a wave, pine leather, and something uniquely Dominic that I had tried so hard to forget. I froze in place, my blood turning to ice. It was actually Dominic. Here. In Father's building. In my sanctuary. His gaze locked precisely onto me. Those dark eyes that I remembered so well, scanning my face as if memorizing every detail. Those eyes full of obsessive gloom erupted with intense light when they fell on me. He looked older, thinner, as if he hadn't been sleeping or eating properly. His usually perfect appearance was disheveled, his dark hair unkempt, his clothes wrinkled. He stepped forward and pulled me tightly into his arms before I could react. His grip was so tight it hurt my ribs, as if he wanted to completely meld me into his bones and blood. I could feel him trembling against me, his whole body shaking with what might have been relief or desperation. His burning lips pressed against my ear, his voice terribly hoarse, carrying undisguisable sobs and a bone-chilling tenderness that I had never heard from him before. "Elena, I finally found you." He had actually found me. The realization hit me like a physical blow, even though I had been half expecting this moment for months. Deep down, I had always known that Dominic's obsessive nature wouldn't let him simply accept my disappearance forever. For these 3 years, I had deliberately avoided searching for any information about them. I had instructed my assistant to block any news articles, business reports, or social media mentions that involved Dominic or his pack. I didn't want to know if he was thriving without me, didn't want to see photos of him with Arya, didn't want any reminders of the life I had left behind. But Father wasn't willing to see me in such a pathetic state, so he specifically looked up information about Dominic to tell me. "You need to know what he's been doing," Father had said one evening over dinner, his expression grim. "Knowledge is power, Elena. And right now you need all the power you can get." So much had happened in these 3 years. According to Father's sources, Dominic and Arya had gone their separate ways, even reaching the point of mutual hatred. Or rather, it was Arya who unilaterally despised him. The breakdown had been spectacular, from what Father told me. When she tried to leave, Dominic had shown his true colors, threatening her, trying to control her movements, becoming increasingly unstable. The final straw came when he started calling her by my name during their intimate moments. And Dominic didn't care at all about her disgust. He had gone somewhat mad, according to Father's investigators. After burying my ashes, he had indeed been depressed for a long period. The reports described him as hollow, going through the motions of running his business but with no real engagement. He barely ate, rarely slept, and spoke to no one unless absolutely necessary. But after a month, his muddled mind suddenly thought of something. Where were his 2 pups? The question had apparently hit him like lightning. According to his assistant, who Father had managed to bribe, Dominic had stormed through his mansion looking for any trace of the children. When he found none, he had flown into a rage, destroying furniture and demanding answers from his staff. Although his power was vast domestically, and even my father couldn't match him in his home territory, his reach wasn't long enough to extend abroad effectively. However, while he couldn't investigate exactly where I had hidden the children, he could detect some clues from scattered traces, bank transfers, flight records, communications with international schools. Slowly, painstakingly, he had begun to piece together the puzzle of where we had gone. His heart began pounding again with renewed purpose. He suddenly realized that given my father's love for me, if I had truly died, he would definitely fight him to the death. The kind of bloody, no-holds-barred warfare that would have made international headlines. Although Father was still causing him trouble everywhere, blocking his business deals, undermining his partnerships, making his life difficult, he didn't feel any real viciousness. The attacks were calculated, strategic, but not the all-out assault of a grieving father seeking vengeance. Perhaps I was truly still alive. That possibility had consumed him completely. He finally realized at this moment that he loved me, or at least, what he thought was love. The desperate, clawing need to possess me, to have me within his sight, to control every aspect of my existence, to find traces of me. He worked desperately. In just 3 years, he had expanded his company's business to the country where my father was located, using legitimate business ventures as cover for his real purpose. He opened offices in major cities, established partnerships with local firms, created an entire network that gave him the resources and connections he needed. Although he couldn't compete with Father directly on his home turf, finding me was still quite easy once he had the infrastructure in place. I had been careless, perhaps. Or maybe I had simply grown too comfortable in my new life, too confident that the distance and Father's protection would keep me safe. Fortunately, although I was captured, Father still sent me a message immediately. The communication came through channels Dominic didn't know about, old pack networks that predated his rise to power. The message was simple. 3 days maximum. Hold on. In 3 days at most, he would come to rescue me. Father had resources that even Dominic couldn't imagine. Connections built over decades of careful alliance building. When he moved to retrieve me, it would be with overwhelming force. Shackles locked around my ankles wasn't pleasant. The metal was expensive, high-grade, designed specifically to weaken werewolves. It made my skin burn where it touched, and I could feel my natural healing abilities being suppressed. Dominic knelt halfway before me, his movements almost reverent as he secured the locks with a key he wore on a chain around his neck. There was something deeply disturbing about his gentleness, the way he handled the restraints as if they were precious jewelry he was bestowing upon me. His fingers lingered on my skin, tracing patterns that made my flesh crawl. He raised his head, trying to kiss me. The sight of his face approaching mine filled me with instant revulsion. This man who had tortured me, who had caused my death, who had destroyed everything I held dear. And now he wanted affection? I jerked my head away violently, and his warm touch landed on my cheek instead. It made me feel sick. The contact burned worse than the silver, a reminder of all the times he had touched me in anger, in cruelty, in cold indifference. My forceful gesture of wiping my face, as if his touch had contaminated me, made Dominic's expression stiffen. I saw a flash of clear hurt and dejection in his eyes, like a child who had been rejected after offering a gift. But he quickly forced those emotions down, his alpha training kicking in to mask his vulnerability. He managed a strained smile that didn't reach his eyes. I know you don't want to see me, and even less want me to find the children. So I only watched them from afar a few times. They're doing well, very healthy, running around happily in the park. I didn't approach or disturb them. The mention of my children sent ice through my veins. He had been watching them, stalking them. I knew that with his methods, he would find the children sooner or later. It was only a matter of time before his obsession expanded to include them fully. I laughed coldly, the sound echoing off the stark walls of my prison. Oh, so? Dominic, are you threatening me with the children now? His face went pale for a moment, as if I had slapped him. His lips moved several times, forming words he couldn't quite speak, but in the end he only lowered his lashes weakly. It doesn't matter. I know you hate me. You have every right to hate me however you want. But Elena, we still have a long time ahead, a whole lifetime. I'll spend every day of my remaining life making it up to you. After saying this, as if afraid to see more disgust in my expression, he left hastily. The heavy door was closed with a final, decisive click, and the sound of the lock engaging was clearly audible. I touched the cold silver metal around my ankle, feeling no emotion whatsoever in my heart. Just 3 days I could wait. During this time, Arya had also come to see me. She arrived on the second day of my captivity, her face drawn with worry and exhaustion. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her usually perfect hair was pulled back. In a messy ponytail, she looked like she hadn't slept since learning I was alive. She didn't know that Dominic had deliberately let her in, and was still trying to get me to escape with her. Elena, we have to get you out of here, she whispered urgently, glancing around the stark room as if looking for weaknesses in its construction. I've been watching the patterns of the guards. There's a 15-minute window during the shift change when I glanced at the red blinking surveillance camera overhead and smiled. The tiny light pulsed steadily, a mechanical heartbeat recording our every word, every gesture. Dominic was undoubtedly watching from wherever he had set up his monitoring station, analyzing my expressions, searching for any hint of my true intentions. I knew what he was afraid of. He was afraid I would disappear from his sight again. The thought of losing me once more had driven him to this desperate measure, this elaborate prison disguised as a sanctuary. So he had locked me here in this windowless room. After all, having been by his side for 10 years, how could I not recognize that these materials were all aerospace grade? The walls were reinforced titanium alloy, the kind used in military bunkers. The door was seamless steel, designed to withstand explosions. Unless I could find the key on him, the one he wore on that chain around his neck like a talisman, there was no way to escape through conventional means. Meeting Aria's red-rimmed eyes, my gaze softened a bit. I knew that without Dominic's interference, she had already met and fallen for her destined mate. According to Father's intelligence reports, she had found happiness with a kind beta from a neighboring pack, someone who treated her with genuine respect and affection. They would even be getting married in a few days, a small ceremony by the lake where they had first met. Coming here now, risking her safety to see me, she was probably tricked by Dominic into testing my intentions. He had likely told her that I was here willingly, that I wanted to reconcile with him, and that he just needed to know if I was planning to stay. Since Dominic wanted to know, I didn't mind speaking directly. Don't worry, I'll be leaving here tomorrow. My voice was calm, matter of fact, as if I were discussing the weather. No. Before she finished processing my words, the door was violently pushed open with a crash that echoed through the small space. He almost crashed through the door, rushing in, his usual composed demeanor completely shattered. His hair was disheveled, his shirt wrinkled and partially untucked, and his eyes were wild with panic. He didn't even have time to steady himself before stumbling to my feet. No, I won't allow it. You're my mate. You can't go to anyone else but me. You promised you'd love me and stay by my side forever. How can you just give up like this? His voice cracked on the last words, the sound of a man whose carefully constructed world was crumbling around him. He reached for my hands, but I pulled them away before he could make contact. I looked down coldly at this man who had once seemed so powerful, so untouchable. Watching this man who had once stood so high above, now humble as dust, groveling at my feet like a common beggar, I suddenly remembered that in my previous life, I had been the same way, kneeling on the ground, desperately pleading, hoping he would spare my children. I could still feel the cold floor against my knees, the way my voice had broken as I begged him to show mercy, the taste of tears and blood in my mouth as I prostrated myself before him. And what had he said then? I thought about it carefully, savoring the memory, then smiled and returned his exact words. Who told you not to listen? The phrase hung in the air between us, sharp as a blade. When you make mistakes, you have to bear the consequences. Dominic's face instantly turned deathly pale, all color draining from his features as if I had physically struck him. His body swayed unsteadily, and for a moment I thought he might collapse entirely. He knew I was determined to leave. The finality in my voice, the cold echo of his own cruelty thrown back at him. It left no room for hope or negotiation. But he wasn't willing to accept it. Elena, please, he whispered, his voice barely audible. I know I made mistakes. I know I hurt you. But I can change. I can be better. I can be the man you wanted me to be. He had only taken a small detour on the path of loving me, hadn't he? A few years of confusion, of being blinded by what he thought he wanted. How could that warrant a death sentence for their relationship? He was terrified. Terrified that I would disappear again, leaving him with nothing but ashes and regret. On the last day, he followed me around constantly, afraid I would vanish. He brought me meals personally, lingering by my side as I ate. He sat in the corner of the room for hours, just watching me breathe. When I slept, he remained awake, his eyes never leaving my face. I watched indifferently, my lips curled in mockery. If only he had known this would happen. If only he had realized years ago what he was throwing away with his cruelty and indifference. Just as the 12th chime rang out from a clock somewhere in the building, I heard a tremendous crash from outside. The sound was followed by shouting, gunfire, and what sounded like heavy machinery moving through the corridors. The building shook slightly, dust raining down from the ceiling. I knew Father had come to get me. I suddenly opened my eyes wide, no longer pretending to be resigned to my fate. Dominic, who had been staring at me intently, realized something almost the instant I opened my eyes. The change in my expression, from defeated acceptance to anticipation, told him everything he needed to know. You can't leave. I've already destroyed the key. There's no way you can get out of here. His voice rose to a shout as enormous anxiety gripped his heart, making him burst into heart-wrenching howls. Elena, don't go. Please. Don't leave me. He threw himself against the door, pounding on the reinforced steel with his fists, until his knuckles bled. This was the first time I'd seen him cry. Real tears streamed down his face, not the calculated displays of emotion he had used in the past to manipulate situations. I had to admit, even in such a wretched state, he still looked beautiful when he cried. The tears made his dark eyes seem larger, more luminous, and his perfect features took on an almost ethereal quality. So I flashed him a brilliant smile, the kind of radiant expression I had once reserved for moments of pure happiness. Under his despairing gaze, I spoke word by word, savoring each syllable. Don't you know? This place was built by people my father sent. If I want to, 100 keys can be made. The revelation hit him like a physical blow. His face went through a range of emotions: confusion, realization, and finally, absolute devastation. So Dominic, goodbye forever. Blinding white light swallowed everything as father's men used controlled explosives to breach the reinforced walls. Vaguely, through the ringing in my ears, I heard Dominic's piercing screams. Elena! No. When I opened my eyes again, the suffocating cologne scent was gone from my nostrils, replaced by the distinctive antiseptic smell of a modern hospital. My vision gradually focused on the white ceiling above, soft light spilling down from recessed fixtures. The beeping of monitors and the distant sound of nurses talking created a peaceful backdrop that was the opposite of the chaos I had just escaped. Then two small faces like carved jade, filled with anxiety and worry, suddenly appeared before my eyes. My nose stung with emotion as I looked at them. My two precious ones. My beautiful children who had grown so much in the months since I had last seen them. They blinked their big eyes and threw themselves into my arms the moment I woke up. Mommy! They recognized me immediately, throwing themselves heavily into my embrace. Their small bodies felt so warm, so real, so perfectly alive. My heart melted completely in that moment. My voice choked with emotion as I held them close. Yes. Mommy's back. Mommy will never leave again. Sunlight streamed through the hospital window, falling on our tightly embracing figures, exceptionally bright and warm. Father, worried that Dominic might kidnap me again, directly contacted his enemies and made a deal. I didn't know the specifics, and I didn't want to know. Some knowledge was too dangerous, too final. I only heard about him again when news came of his death several months later. The report was brief, clinical. An attack on his compound. No survivors. I didn't care. I just watched the children running in the sunlight outside the hospital window, and smiled genuinely for the first time in years.